Hey there, music lovers. Welcome to the channel. Thanks so much for dropping by and for checking out this video. And in this one, I'm going to be talking about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductees that were just announced for the 2019 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. You may recall when the nominees were announced not too long ago, I did a whole video about that. And I picked 6 artists out of that list that I thought were going to be inducted. So I thought it would be fun to compare notes to see how correct I was, just for fun. And also, I talked about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I gave my opinion of them in that video. I really went off on them. I'm not going to repeat myself, so you can check that video out. But basically, in a nutshell, I feel very much the same way that Bruce Dickinson of Iron Maiden feels. You may recall he just recently went off on them too. I was reading this article where he basically says the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is a load of bullshit, and that's what I feel. I think if we had to kind of like narrow it down, look, Tupac Shakur is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, all right? So if he can get in and Madonna can get in and Grandmaster Flash, they're not rock and roll. If they can get in, then most anybody can get in. The criteria's changed, the rules changed, the name hasn't changed, but everything else has changed. I say, any of these artists that they've just inducted, I say are, fine. They fit the criteria that the hall is going by now. And in that video, I chose Def Leppard, Stevie Nicks, Janet Jackson, the Zombies, and I also chose Kraftwerk. Now, they didn't get in, and I'm kind of surprised that they're not in, because like I said in the other video, you turn on the radio, especially top 40 radio, you can hear Kraftwerk. I mean, Kraftwerk has really been a very influential band. I see no reason why they shouldn't get in, especially if all these other artists are. But the band that did make it in that I did not predict was The Cure. And so basically, and also I guess like Radiohead is also in there too now. So just to sum up who is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for 2019, it's going to be Def Leppard, Stevie Nicks, Janet Jackson, The Cure, Radiohead, and the Zombies. So I was pretty close. I did have a viewer comment on the other video. Jeff, you were so close, man. I was looking through the comments to see who was the closest, and Jeff was right on it. He predicted The Cure and Janet Jackson and Def Leppard and Stevie Nicks and Radiohead, so I got to give it to you, Jeff. But I just wanted to go through the list of these bands. And again, I'm not going to bicker about who should be in and who shouldn't, because it doesn't really matter. It's just interesting to kind of go over these artists and talk about them a little bit. That's what I find the most interesting. Because there's a lot of history with these artists. There's a lot of interesting tidbits about these particular guys. And like, for instance, the Zombies. All right, let's take a look at them. I figured they would probably get in. I don't know. Something in my gut told me it was the time of the season for the Zombies to get in. And what's really interesting is that the Hall of Fame induction ceremony is set for March the 29th, 2019. And that is 50 years to the day that time of the season hit #1. So that's kind of bizarre, isn't it? The Zombies have been waiting for 30 years. They have been eligible to get into the Hall of Fame for 30 years. From what I could hear, the members of the band are very, very happy about it. I even saw one of them say that it was a life-defining moment. So it means a lot to the Zombies to get into the Hall of Fame. And it's just one of those things where it's like, they had to wait 30 years, but yet Stevie Nicks and Def Leppard get in on the first shot. Green Day gets in on the first shot. Where's the rhyme or reason here? I don't know. That's part of my beef with the Hall of Fame. And the Zombies too, I would have never have thought that they would have been Rock and Roll Hall of Fame caliber. I mean, they really only had 2, maybe 3 songs that anybody knows. You know, there's a Time of the Season. She's Not There. And there was another one that escapes me. I can't think of it. But you know, far cry from the Kinks or from the Who or from, you know, a lot of bands from the 60s that also have been inducted. You know, why the Zombies? They've only got, like I said, 2 or 3 songs maybe that anybody even knows. How do they fit into the, you know, same league as some of these really big bands? And again, I think we're getting to a point where the Hall of Fame is just less discerning. I don't know what else to really say. Next up, we have Radiohead. Now, Radiohead, you know, they're one of these bands. I never really was a huge fan of theirs. I like a few of their songs, but I never really got into them a whole lot. You know, I like, of course, Creep and like Karma Police, Paranoid Android, High and Dry, Fake Plastic Tree, some of that kind of thing. But really, their music to me is a bit of a downer. I'm really just not into that vibe. Saw this interview with Tom York where he was talking about how if he could give his younger self some advice, it would be to lighten the fuck up. And that kind of sums it up for me with them. It's just I really have not been able to really get into Radiohead a whole lot. But I do recognize that they've been an influence. And they should be in there, sure. I'm kind of shocked that they're getting in as soon as they are, really. Number 3 on the list is Roxy Music. That's another band that I was never really crazy about. I like some of their stuff. Of course, you know, Love is the Drug is probably the song that most people know. Avalon is cool, but they've had some other cool songs too. Just never just listened to them a whole lot. But they were very much of an influential band, especially on like the new wave scene that was coming in towards the late 70s or early part of the 80s. And Brian Ferry, I liked some of his solo stuff. They recently asked him, you know, who he would like to have induct Roxy Music into the Hall of Fame. And Brian Ferry mentioned that he would like to have Nile Rodgers of Chic induct them. So I'd be interested to see if that happens. Next up, number 4 is The Cure. And of course, that's a band that, you know, very influential band there. They should have been in a while ago, really. I mean, you know, very much an influence on the alternative rock scene, along with the Smiths, who should be in here. I don't know why we're not talking about them. Of course, REM is already in there, and there's many other bands too that should also be in here, but The Cure definitely. And it'd be interesting to see what lineup shows up. I saw this interview with the keyboard player, Roger O'Donnell, and he was talking about how the current lineup is the best one, he feels, and that the current lineup is the one that should perform. So we'll see. We'll see. The Cure really haven't been all that active in the past 30 years. They've only put out like 5 albums in the past 30 years, and those came in the first 20. They haven't put an album out in the past 10, although they're working on a new one. But yeah, so the Cure should be in there, definitely. And then we get to Janet Jackson. And yeah, Janet Jackson is definitely a pop artist, but I have to say this, Janet Jackson is the shit. She is a self-made artist. She has, of course, the famous brother, Michael Jackson, but she always tried to distance herself from Michael Jackson. She never tried to hang on to his career, any of the success that he had at all. I mean, yeah, they did maybe perform together once or twice. They did a song called Scream, but for the most part, Janet Jackson has carved out her own career. Kind of reminds me of like Julian Lennon. You know, he didn't go down a predictable path where he was trying to just, you know, like live off of his father's fame and sing a bunch of his songs and go out on tour doing a bunch of his father's songs. And he has his own career. Now, he may have suffered for it. He might not have gotten a lot of the offers that he could have gotten or whatever, but he did what he did because he is a true artist, kind of like Janet Jackson. You know, she has her own thing, and she's done very, very well. I think she's done better than most people even know about. I mean, she's put out like 11 albums. 7 of them have gone to #1. You know, she had like 18 consecutive top 10 hits in like a 10-year span between, I think it was 89 and 99. And she's had a #1 album in each of the past 4 decades. I mean, she's one of the most successful artists ever. And she definitely deserves to be in here. And like I said, I'm not going to get into this. Oh, well, she's not rock and roll. Tupac, okay? Tupac. So I don't even want to talk about whether she should be in. She's a major artist. She's been very successful and influential too. She should be in there, really. I always thought it would have been cool too if she went out and did like a Michael Jackson tour. You know, I know that I was just talking about how she never, you know, tried to hang on to Michael's career, but you know, once he passed away, there was nobody that could go out. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of Michael Jackson imitators out there, and of course you get the tribute acts that go out, but really, Janet Jackson, if anybody could do her brother service, it would be Janet Jackson. She even looks like him, or he looked like her, however you want to look at it. But she could, I mean, how cool would it be if Janet Jackson went out and did a tour where she just played Michael Jackson's stuff and did the whole recreation of some of his music videos, maybe like Thriller and all. I mean, she could really go out and just blow people's minds. I've never even heard it mentioned, but I think she could go out and do it. I think it would be really, really cool. But I could also see her not going anywhere near that because she's got her own thing, and she has enough of her own thing to sustain herself. She doesn't need that. Up next, we got Stevie Nicks, #6. Now, Stevie Nicks, of note for her, she's the first woman to be inducted twice into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. She's gone in with Fleetwood Mac, and then she's going in as a solo artist. No other woman has that distinction. And I don't know how many others are going to get that. How many others could possibly get that? Diana Ross is a possible. And then you've got Tina Turner. That's a name that I never even hear brought up. And, you know, she went in with Ike, but she definitely could go in as a solo artist. And I think that she's probably the next most eligible to have this type of thing where she's inducted twice. And this is the first time that Nicks has been inducted, and she got right in. And let me just say something about Stevie Nicks too, you know. I'm just going to preface this. She deserves it, okay? She's had a very successful career. She's been a major influence on female artists and everything. I get that. But at the same time, I think that Stevie Nicks is a bit overrated. I really, really do. I think a lot of her success comes from who she has surrounded herself with over the many, many years. Let's just take Fleetwood Mac, all right? She would have never been in Fleetwood Mac if it hadn't been for Lindsey Buckingham. You may recall, Fleetwood Mac reached a point where their guitar player, singer, I think it was Bob Welch at that time, left the band. And so Mick Fleetwood needed a guitar player, singer, and he had heard Lindsey in Sound City. He went to Sound City to go see Keith Olsen or something. I don't know what he was doing there, but he heard Lindsey Buckingham in one of the studios laying down a guitar lick on the Buckingham Nicks album. And sometime later, when his guitar player left in Fleetwood Mac, he was like, who was that dude? He went back to Sound City to find out who that guy was. And then, long story short, he's calling up Lindsey Buckingham to get him into Fleetwood Mac to see if he'd be interested. Buckingham was like, look, I'm a package deal. If you want me, you got to take my girlfriend too. And so, you know, because Fleetwood Mac didn't need another woman. They had Christine. They didn't need Stevie Nicks. So Stevie Nicks came with Buckingham. And it's kind of interesting how that went on, and flash forward to now where Stevie Nicks is giving Mick Fleetwood the ultimatum, you know, either Buckingham goes or I go. It's like another one of those things. And I know that it's not that simple, that there's lots of shit that went on in between all this time. But isn't that kind of interesting how the ultimatum went the other way to get Buckingham out of the band? And then, of course, all the stuff that Stevie Nicks did in Fleetwood Mac was produced by Lindsey Buckingham. You know, he helped shape her songs to make them what they are. They would have never been what we know them as, the classics that we know them as, if it wasn't for Lindsey Buckingham. He was not only the reason why Fleetwood Mac is as popular as they are, but also I think he has a lot to do with why Stevie Nicks is as popular as she is. He crafted her songs, he shaped them and produced them and made them into these classics. And then, you know, when she did her first solo album, that album was a group effort too. I mean, she basically had Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers as her backing band. You know, Tom Petty produced her first album and the Heartbreakers played on it. And it was a massive album. She had duets with Petty. She had a duet with Don Henley. Her second album was produced by Tom Petty. And really, Stevie Nicks hasn't done shit in the past 30 years. You know, after she left the whole Buckingham thing, and after she, you know, went solo and worked with Tom Petty and all those guys, when she finally was left to her own and was working with other people, there was nothing close to the success that she had with those guys. And so I think that her success is really largely due to a lot of the people that were working with her and helping her out. Now, I know that every artist has help. They don't do things by themselves, but, and I'm not saying that Nicks isn't deserving, because she did write a lot of these songs. She just had a lot of help with them in crafting them and producing them and all that stuff. I'm just saying that I think that her status is a bit overblown and that she's not, you know, like Janet Jackson has been consistent. She's been putting out albums consistently since the 80s and they've been successful. They've been popular. I mean, you know what I'm saying? She's a different artist than Stevie Nicks. Stevie Nicks, I think, is resting more on the laurels and the kind of the affiliations that she had back in the 70s and the early 80s. But really, for the past 30 years, Stevie Nicks has been kind of like a non-factor, really. I know that might sound kind of harsh, but that's just kind of the way that I see Stevie Nicks. But I do think that Stevie Nicks deserves to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. She has influenced a lot of female artists. They've been very inspired by her lyrics and by her songwriting and all that, and I get that. You know, she definitely deserves to be in there. And finally, we get to Def Leppard, number 7. This is the band that won the popular vote, biggest vote getter amongst the fans, and their first time nominated. Joe Elliott, the lead singer, mentioned that it was a badge of honor to get inducted into the Hall of Fame. They're very excited about it. And, you know, if you had asked me back in the 80s, or even the 90s, if I ever thought that Def Leppard would get into the Hall of Fame, I would have said, no way, they're just not big enough. They're just not good enough, you know. But I think we've reached a point where Def Leppard is suddenly looking like, yeah, that's a good option to go into the Hall of Fame. And the reason why I say that is because I just don't think that, I don't know, I think that we've reached a point where the criteria has changed. The quality of the bands that we've got left to pick from has changed. Like I said before, the Zombies, they had like 2 or 3 hits. Why are they in the Hall of Fame, you know? Def Leppard, they had like 2 albums that were of any count. They were huge. They were like major sellers. But compare them to like a U2. They had multiple albums. You know, you had, you know, Unforgettable Fire, Joshua Tree, you had Rattle and Hum, you had Octung Baby, and then you've had others that were, you know, just many different albums, many hits, different style. I mean, they kind of evolved, and I see that U2 is, you know, you can love them or hate them, but a band like U2 has just got so much more depth. They got much more, like many more albums to show for, bigger span of time that they were popular. They're still popular. Still a very much an active band. I think they suck now, but still, they're still going. Def Leppard, you know, after those 2 albums that they did, Pyromania and Hysteria, they were always trying to recapture that. And they may have had some, some other hits and everything, but then they came nowhere close to what they did on those two major albums for them. And, you could even throw a little bit of the Stevie Nicks thing I was talking about. If it wasn't for Mutt Lange, the producer, what would those albums have actually been? Would those albums have been as successful if Mutt wasn't involved? And so, because when they didn't work with Mutt, they didn't have a whole lot of success. They were never able to really capture that magic again. They've always been chasing it. They're still trying to put an album out that catches fire, and so I don't see Def Leppard in the same category, the same, place where you would have a U2 and other bands too that have gotten into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, that have got multiple albums with, many different songs that have gone to the masses, that have been very successful. I don't know. There's just something about Def Leppard that just doesn't strike me as being Rock and Roll Hall of Fame eligible, at least not compared to what was going in the 70s and in the 80s. And I think what impresses me the most about Def Leppard is about how they have handled themselves, how they have been so professional, and they've got so much integrity. I mean, this is a band that weathered some real shitstorms here. I mean, they lost their guitarist, Steve Clark. Their drummer lost an arm. How many bands have had drummers that have lost I can't think of any. And they keep going. They waited for him. He decided that he wanted to keep going, and he learned how to play drums with one arm. He not only did that, but he kind of like revolutionized how you would do that with like an electronic drum kit and playing with your feet. I mean, who the hell does this? I got to give Rick Allen tremendous credit, the heart that he has and the integrity that the band has for standing by his side and not going on without him. It says a lot about that. To me, means more than any of the music that they created. I think that Def Leppard is they're a stand-up band. They really, really are. And so I definitely think that they deserve to be in more for that, because they represent integrity. They represent something that you just don't see a lot of. How influential are they? I don't know. I can tell how influential other bands have been on Def Leppard. You can definitely hear Queen, you can hear Bowie, and you can hear a lot of those British bands from the 60s and 70s, T-Rex and Mott the Hoople. I haven't heard too many bands say that Def Leppard was an inspiration. I don't really know. I haven't heard anybody say the Zombies were an inspiration. And that's kind of what I'm trying to get at here, is I think we've reached a point where there's no more Who, there's no more Kinks, Beatles, Stones, Led Zeppelin. These bands they're already in. And we don't have bands like that now. So the pickings are a bit more slim. A band like Def Leppard, who's had a couple of major albums and not much more, is suddenly the top of the heap, because who else are we going to put in there? I still say that the Doobie Brothers should be in there. A band like Toto, they should be in there. And there's a bunch of others. Robert Plant, why isn't he in there? You want to talk about a solo career, he should be in there. Phil Collins, why isn't he in there? Talk about a solo career. So I don't know. Those are my ramblings. That's my look at these 7 that are going into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And I want to know what you guys think. What do you think about these 7? What do you think about, some of the things I've talked about? Do you think the Zombies should be going in? You think that Stevie Nicks is overrated? How about Def Leppard? What do you think about them? Put it down below. Comment below. I want to know what you think. And we'll see what happens. March 29th. Interesting to see. The next thing is going to be who shows up. who gets inducted, who doesn't. Is there going to be any shit over that? I'm not really sensing from this induction that there's going to be a lot of crazy stuff going on the way there was in the past. You know, like is Slash and Axl Rose going to show up on the same stage? You know, is Richie Blackmore going to show up? Is Peter Cetera going to play with Chicago? You know, I don't see any major problems going on here. I think The Cure is probably the biggest question mark as to who's going to get inducted and who's going to show up and that kind of thing. But I think a lot of these bands are grateful that they're getting in. That's the sense that I get from this particular induction, is that these bands, I think, are so grateful. They love the fact that they're getting recognized, and you know, all the power to them. What can I say? Let me know what you think. Comments below. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and hit that subscribe button too. And I'll be back soon with another video.